Hey folks, this is Tron Games and welcome to Total War Warhammer 3. Today we're going to do a getting started guide with Count Noctilus. Um, Overall, kind of this Vampire Coast faction it's a pretty fun faction actually to play, but there's a couple of really important mechanics to be aware of, and we'll start by just talking about Count Noctilus just in general. So he's got kind of an army to start with here. We'll move this guy together, but he also has this kind of shipbuilding section. So he kind of becomes this mobile fortress to move around. And so leveling up his shipbuilding is a really important thing to do. Now, this kind of allows you to recruit units. You can, recruit heroes, just about anything from his ship, which is really good. Now, you also start with Galleon's Graveyard. This is actually a really quite strong starting position because nobody really comes here. This is a pretty safe location, like 95% of the time, maybe even more than that. So the starting position for Count Noctilus is really quite good. You're close to this army from Calidor, and you're just straight up stronger than them. Yeah, like you just have a significantly better army than they do. Now, just a couple things to go through here. We've got kind of the overall faction. And so there are these war declaration missions that you'll get occasionally. They'll literally tell you to go declare war on somebody and they'll give you a reward for it. You get kind of improved relations with the followers of Nagash, increased pirate crew recruitment capacity, and it takes less turns to recruit Necrofex Colossuses. Necrofex Colossuses are extremely strong unit. You start with one. Your initial army is like just okay. Other than the Necrofex Colossus. This unit is so good, you do not want to let it die under pretty much any circumstances. Count Noctilus is really quite an interesting lord, but really he's built around, improving the Necrofex Colossus. He takes reduced upkeep, he adds additional weapon strength for large units, which Necrofex Colossuses are, and he gets improved income from sacking settlements. So what I like to do with him right off the bat is you want to start fighting with Calidor, but your army right off the bat is straight up better than this army, but you can actually recruit additional units here using the Raise Dead function. So just like Vampire Counts, Vampire Coast has this Raise Dead mechanic, which is really quite strong. I typically tend to pull a few of these guys right away because we want to come over, and if you do auto-resolve this and you don't raise dead on those units, this won't be a decisive victory. I typically would fight this manually, but you want to start doing it. Now, the Vampire Counts, or Vampire Coast, sorry, have a mechanic called infamy, and so you have an option to decrease your infamy, which improves loyalty, unit experience. This is a terrible option most of the time, and I'll explain why in a second. You can get replenishment, or you can get just additional money. Replenishment in the early game is always pretty good. Money is always fine too, so I'm going to take replenishment this time. And then we're going to move our way onto the shore. So what we want to kind of do to start with is we want to just beat on Calidor repeatedly. Like I said, we just straight up outclass them to start with. We just are a better faction than they are. One thing that is interesting is going to the shore, you actually can recruit even more units. Using Raise Dead. So I already pulled some zombie pirate gunnery mob out of the ocean, and I can do it again on land. So it's really quite useful to be able to make use of that mechanic, especially in the early game. Now, the one thing that you want to be using here is the encamp stance, and it's for two reasons. One, it gives you replenishment, and 2, it allows you to level up your ship. So leveling up your ship is really good, especially in the early game. I'm going to take the increased movement range, and then if we go over to Galleon's Graveyard, there's not much going on here. You do see that the Vampire Coast have a Vampiric Corruption effect, so they works just like the vampires, and you're going to have to stay in regions and corrupt them for extended periods of time if you want to hold on to them. Now, one thing you want to do here, don't forget to do, is set your commandment for the Galleon's Graveyard, because it's only one place there. I typically end up selecting the growth, just increasing how fast it grows. But let's talk a little bit about a couple of the mechanics. So there are there's this infamy mechanic. So there's lots of pirates that kind of roam around. These bottom 4, yourself, Luther Harkon, Silvester Direfin, and Aranus Assaultspite, these are all playable factions, and all the playable factions start at the bottom. All of these are different kind of rebel factions that go around. These rebel factions are, the number 1 infamy one there is really strong, but as you get to different levels of infamy, you can unlock sea shanty verses. The sea shanty verses here are shown. This gives like additional reload skill, melee defense. This one gives additional reload skill, melee defense, and additional reload skill, melee defense. So loading these up, while it's good to get them, it isn't a requirement. You don't necessarily need them. In the early game, I really don't worry that much about getting infamy. I just worry about leveling up Count Noctilus and just building up his ship into just this really strong fortress. Now you have a few options here with tech right off the bat. I like to go for the supernatural regeneration, just additional casualty replenishment. Other options that you can go for right away are reducing kind of the upkeep and improving the damage of your missile units, so that's another option. A lot of your melee units are kind of, this whole section over here is okay if you're going to try to push buildings and you're going to, raid land and take territory there. I tend to like to just stay on the ship for the most part, because the primary goal for the Vampire Coast faction is to just build infamy. Your short campaign victory is tied to getting 8,000 infamy, and your long victory is tied to getting 25,000 infamy. This means there isn't really anyone specific that you need to target. You can, of course, collect territory and that sort of thing, and it's good to do that, especially rich territories, but overall you just have to occupy, loot, raise, or sack different settlements, and that means that Count Noctilus can kind of sail all over and raid coastal settlements just about everywhere. Now there are a couple of things we want to show here. So there are certain sections, or certain pieces on the map that'll give you treasure maps. So we'll show one of those in a second. You can't do this one until you complete the first treasure map mission. As you activate more and more of these, you see the kind of unlock requirements here. So you got to own 3 settlements, hit rank 12. These are quite good units. And then you have plunder pile buildings. So you can actually, kind of like the Skaven, go and set up undercities in certain coastal sections that are called pirate coves. But we'll look a little bit at the treasure maps here first. So you start with a single treasure map mission. You'll get more as you go, and it kind of takes you to, so there's a treasure somewhere in this area, and that's actually a stance that that your lord can go into. So I've got him in there, but you can actually stance dig for treasure to do that. And then there are also pieces of 8. So these are held by basically other pirates.
These puppets.
And so these are good. They unlock certain regiments of renown. So if you can get them, it's good. I don't chase those in any sense. So for now, we'll move on to the next turn. Um, there are a few major enemies to watch out for right off the bat. Particularly Lothern. Lothern is kind of just over in this region here. Um, there are like, because you're a pirate and you're kind of, you know, in the middle of the ocean, you do have lots of other factions that could cause issues for you, but generally speaking, you're going to be working on kind of factions in this area that you start in, as well as other coastal factions. So really there aren't really any major enemies to watch out for other than Lothern. The only one that the only other thing that I recommend is just pick your battles carefully at the beginning. Count Noctilus is a really good lord. Yeah, he does do quite well, and we'll continue along here. So you have a couple options in your second turn. You can go after Val's Anvil, or you can go to Taurus Athai. Usually I'll come over here and beat these guys up. It's a close victory. Again, I'd fight a lot of this manually, but you could raise this for increased infamy. I don't want to do that. I just want to sack it for now because I really want to focus on getting basically Count Noctilus raised up. And again, here we'll recruit a few more units just to ensure that if we do get attacked in the next few turns, we are well set up to handle that. And then here, level these guys up. Eventually we want to take Val's Anvil. I usually take this and hold it, but off the bat, just beating on Taurus Athai is a really good strategy. There is only really one other thing that is that you should be aware of at the beginning, is that you're actually at war with two factions. So it's not just Kalidor, you're actually at war with Tirnoch as well. So you can actually just go rip up this slope and you can beat these guys up and just, you want to fight in this area for a while because you've got to build corruption up. But you do actually start as quite a strong faction. Other factions that are in the general area, there is another vampire coast down here, and then you have Slaanesh is actually up in this area. You've got Tyrion over in this area here. Tyrion is the most annoying because they don't tend to like you very much. So that's about all I've got for now. If you like the content, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel for more in the future. Thanks for watching.